and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, hi, I'm Lucia and I'm currently working on a massive ACOTAR themed Sims 4 save file where I'm recreating the entire world of Tharion. So basically it's courts, characters, builds, the whole vibe, and I'm also adding some of my own original characters and locations. And today I'm so excited because we are finally jumping into the Autumn Court household, more specifically the Vanserra family. And we've already seen their grand Gothic castle in my previous video, and now it's time to bring the people who live inside those castle walls to life. So in this video, we'll be recreating Tharian Vanserra, High Lord of the Autumn Court, his wife, Lady of the Autumn Court, and some of their sons. So grab a cup of tea or coffee or maybe a glass of fairy wine, some snacks, get comfy, and let's dive right in together. Okay, so let's start with the head of the family, Beron, the High Lord of the Autumn Court. So he's high fae, obviously, and like the rest of his court, his magic is tied to the element of fire. And yeah, his power is very, fierce and destructive, reflecting not just the autumn season, but also his temperament. He's very hot-headed, proud, and often cruel. And Beron's personality in the books is, well, let's just say he's not exactly a beloved figure, and he's very cunning, manipulative, and rules his court with an iron fist. And he's extremely ambitious and places immense value on power and, appearances. And aesthetically, Beron practically embodies that warm luxury, think rich reds, gold accents, dark browns, and he really carries himself like someone who owns every inch of the room, because, well, he usually does. Next up is Lady of the Autumn Court, which I named Seraphine in my save file, and she's Beron's wife. Now, if you read the books, you'll know that she's actually unnamed, and that's why I decided to give her the name Seraphine, inspired by the fiery celestial imagery that suits Autumn Court magic so well. And as I said, she's a Beron's wife consort. Not a high lady, because in Tharion only men can become, high lords and rule over courts, unfortunately. But there is one big exception to that rule later on in the series, but I won't spoil anything here. So let's get back to Seraphine. So she's very elegant, beautiful, and carries herself with quite dignity. And she has warm auburn hair, soft autumn-toned features, and she truly cares for her children. Unfortunately, her voice within the court is limited because, she's a woman. Yeah, and because Beron is deeply patriarchal and domineering, and she often has to exist in his shadow, unfortunately. And as for her magic, so it's also tied to fire, though unlike Beron's destructive flames, I imagine her fire to be more gentler, more like warmth, hearth, and protection. And she's actually a beloved mother figure, even if her marriage isn't a loving one. Now let's move on to the children, starting with the eldest and most well-known, Eris. Tharian Vanserra. So he's Beron's heir, basically the future High Lord of the Autumn Court and the general of their armies. And he's actually a complex character, and on the surface he's arrogant and cold and even cruel at times, but underneath there are layers to him, and there's something in him that hasn't been fully revealed yet, but he's not simply the villain some think he is. And yeah, Aries is extremely powerful with fire magic, precise and deadly, and he's sharp-minded and ambitious, but unlike Beron, he plays the long game and he knows exactly how to navigate court politics. And as for his aesthetic, which mirrors the Autumn Court's grandeur, so it's warm and golden, slightly intimidating, and he has that commanding presence that makes it clear that he's designed to rule, whether people like it or not. Now we are moving on to the remaining surviving Vanserra brothers. So in total, there are 7 Vanserra sons. The eldest is Eris, as I mentioned before, and the youngest is Lucian, and the rest of the brothers are unnamed. So 2 of them are no longer alive, which leaves 3 remaining. Since these brothers were never named or developed in the series, I decided to give them their own names and personalities to kinda enrich this family and my entire save file. Okay, so let's start with Kalin Vanserra, the second eldest son, and he's one of my original characters, basically, because he doesn't appear in the books as Kalin Vanserra, and I imagined him as someone who's always lived in Aries' shadow. You know, being the second son in a family like this isn't easy, and I imagine him being very competitive, always trying to prove himself, constantly training, constantly fighting to be seen. And he's actually one of the strongest warriors in the Autumn Court, absolutely dedicated to physical training, weapon mastery, and strategy. And from the outside, he seems very stoic and maybe even a bit cold, but deep down, he's incredibly emotional and complex. And his secret passion is playing the violin, and it's his quiet escape from the constant pressure to be enough. And I love the idea of that, though. Disciplined warrior sneaking away to play music when no one's watching. And then we have Tharian Vanserra, the third son, and honestly the troublemaker of the family. So he's the ultimate hedonist, loves wealth, attention, popularity, parties, and the luxury, and he has zero interest in politics and training or, responsibility. And while his brothers are strategizing or training, Tharion is probably sipping wine in silk robes somewhere, admiring himself in a mirror, and he lives for pleasure and doesn't hide it. Beautiful clothes, fine food, expensive things, and he's charming, a bit vain, and honestly, he doesn't care what anyone thinks as long as he's enjoying himself. And finally, we have Corvian Vanserra, the fourth son, and probably the softest soul in this entire family. So I imagine Corvian to be sweet, emotional, and artistic, a total contrast to the rest of his family. And he dreams of becoming a great artist, he loves books and music, and he's far more interested in the world of ideas than the world of war or politics. And Beron, of course, sees him as a disappointment, and he doesn't really fit into the family's rigid structure, but Corvian doesn't let that crush his spirit, and he stays kind, gentle, and follows his dreams anyway. And in my version of the story, Corvian is also homosexual, though he hasn't come out to his family because he fears Baron's reaction. And yeah, the Autumn Court is a very traditional and conservative place, and it's something he struggles with deeply, but it doesn't define or diminish his worth. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have Lucian as the youngest Vanserra brother, and I'm only mentioning him briefly here because he's still very much a part of this family, but I actually created his sim earlier in my Spring Court household CAS video, together with Tamlin and the rest of that household. And for those who've read the books, you'll know that at some point Lucian leaves the Autumn Court and goes to live with Tamlin in the Spring Court. So in my save file, Lucian currently lives in Spring Court, but I still wanted to acknowledge him here as the youngest Vanserra brother. And that's my version of the Vanserra family, and I really hope you liked it. Of course, you can download this entire household on my CurseForge as always. And I'm also open for commissions, whether it's builds or custom sims, so feel free to reach out to me via email, which you can find in the video description, or DM me on Instagram. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, leave me a comment, or share it with someone who'd love a bit of ACOTAR magic in their game. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye bye, guys!